all-important move to a shore-based career. If you're tuning in from the UK, I hope you are keeping cool in this really warm weather. And if you are at sea, I hope you are safe and well. This webinar today is part of the Nautilus International and Maritime London Sea to City Mentoring Scheme. This is open to all full members of Nautilus International, and we're going to provide you some information about that scheme in the chat after the webinar. So if you are interested, please do follow the link that we provide. If you're not currently a member of Nautilus International, I'll also provide you with a link to our joining page where you can find out all the benefits of becoming a member, both while you're at sea and when you make that move ashore. So this webinar is meant to be really interactive. I'm going to be putting lots of questions to our guests today, but I encourage everybody who is joining us to do the same. Again, feel free to put those in the chat as and when you wish, and I'll try and put as many of those questions to our guests as I can. So some introductions. My name is Helen Kelly, and I am the Director of Communications, Campaigns and Digital at Nautilus International. And today I'm in conversation with Richard Meikle, Partner and Master Maritime at Solis Marine. Richard spent 20 years at sea, starting as a deck cadet with the P&O Group and working for several cruise operators before hanging up his epaulettes and moving ashore. Richard is an active member of the Sea to City Mentoring Scheme and is currently guiding one of our members through his own journey ashore. So he can very much provide information and assistance on experience in mentoring and helping others to make that transition. So welcome, Richard.
Thank you very much, Helen.
Lovely to have you. Thank you very much for your time. I was hoping you could perhaps start by giving us a little bit of an insight into your own journey. So I explained in the intro, Richard, that you started off as a deck cadet, but why maritime and why cruise?
An interesting choice, and really didn't know. I was leaving school, didn't know what to do, and by some coincidence ended up applying for a cadetship, having had no knowledge of the sea, no family members who'd been at sea. Okay. And I literally saw the advert on the school wall saying come to an open day at Fleetwood Maritime College, and off I went in about 2 weeks' time down to Fleetwood. Spoke to a few people, spoke to some shipping companies, and I went, that's what I want to do. That sounds good, and went from there. And so 6 months later, I was at sea in my first ship.
Wow, that's quite a big change, very quick and very young as well. What kind of insight can you give us in terms of your experience at that time? Were you ready for it, do you think? Was there enough support for you as you were kind of doing that training phase of your career?
I think there was. The cadetship was very well supported. I was with the P&O Group, and there was support there, and we had cadet managers who supported us through that. It was an interesting time, one where I went from the start of my cadetship to the end of my cadetship and didn't see another cadet get employed. So there was good times and bad times to join, and it all goes into when the right time to do things is and picking your moments. But I was fortunate enough that when I got to the end of my cadetships, and I had done a mixed cadetship on bulk carriers, container ships, cruise ships, reefer ships. But just as I was coming to the end of my cadetship, there was an upturn in cruise, and I was asked to go as third officer on Canberra.
Interesting. So you had an opportunity. It kind of sounds like it fell in your lap to a degree. What kind of really made you kind of push in that direction? You said there was an uptick in the cruise industry at the time. Was there a lot of employment, a lot of opportunity?
There wasn't a lot of opportunity at that time, and there was lots of people still being redundant. So you had to pick your route. A lot of people I would see with who were in P&O went to the RFA or went to ferry or went to offshore, and lots of people were moving around to find the opportunities, and that still goes on today. You've got to it's as much the opportunities that are there and the people who are looking for people as much as the career choice you want to take. And that's where the sort of compromises come in as to what I would like to do and what the opportunities. And is it do I want to do the job I want to do, or do I want to further my career and go down the route where I'm going to get promoted and move along quickly, or do I want to stick my ground and build my career in one particular avenue? And that's everyone's choice.
Yes, no, absolutely. Well, cruise is a great choice, of course. You've got that international element, you know, to the industry, and there's lots of different businesses in this space. What was your experience at the time, and kind of talk us through as you move through the ranks from deck cadet?
I went off I was with P&O and Princess Cruises, and I was there in the end for about another 10 years, building my way through, slowly progressing through the ranks. And again, things were moving quite slowly. So once I got to a particular point, I think it was I can see that if I want to make captain, it's going to take me another 10 years here at least, because I know how many people are ahead of me. And there was literally people with a list trying to work out how many people it would take before you might get that job.
Wow.
And so I halfway made the decision to move on and go, I know there are other cruise companies that are expanding very quickly and they're going to need more people. So I'm going to take my chances and hop off and have a go somewhere else.
And in terms of training, was there specific training at that time, and kind of any difference in that training between then and now?
Well, I think with the years I spent at P&O and Princess, I had superb training. They provided us with every level of training, and then it's only when you leave those organizations you realize that other operators may not be as good.
Perhaps joining an organization.
I ended up my first. I was captain of a ship here in the UK, and then I joined in an American company, which was completely sort of operated and took any officer from around the world, and there was no bias one way or the other. And you realize a brand new company, brand new ships, but with very little support. You came with your ticket, and the job was, you've taken the job, you've signed on the dotted line, get on with the job. And the minimum of training was only what was required, and no more was given, and you were expected just to get on with it, which in many ways is good. But depends which side you're on. But it was surprising to see the lack of support, and you assign, you stamp, off you go. And that was very different to the world that I'd come from. But it's interesting to see both sides.
I can imagine that can be the making of many people, can't it? Because you're kind of thrown into a situation, and you either, hate to say it, sink or swim, right? You either step up to the challenge, or it's not going to be an environment for you.
Yeah, and I think when you do end up slightly isolated and you realize that the other officers and all the crew are with you, then it's your opportunity to mentor, to guide those people through, because they're not getting a lot of support. You are the support mechanism. Therefore, it falls on you to find out who needs support, who the good people are, and supporting everyone in a different way. And you end up sort of randomly not having that support, so you having to provide it.
So what rank did you reach before you made that transition ashore?
I was chief officer, effectively. I was chief officer, and then before I left P&O, I then moved across, and luckily, through a bit of being in the right place at the right time, I ended up relatively quickly as being master. I was master with a UK firm, and then I was master with Renaissance Cruises for about 3 years before they went bankrupt in 2001. So September the 11th, they ran out of money, and 8 of their cruise ships were stopped on the spot, and time to make a decision.
Wow. Very daunting is the first word that comes to mind. So that is a situation that you will be very unprepared for. I expect you didn't know this was happening. What was your thought process at that time?
Well, it's interesting because you've got to, very quickly, things happen very quickly, and within a week, your ship is stopped, the passengers are off, you are left isolated with a ship full of, or half a ship full of crew, trying to manage the ongoing situation, trying to look after the crew, trying to get everybody off and everybody settled and make sure everybody gets paid.
Absolutely.
Primarily, which is everyone's priority.
Absolutely.
And then, as far as they were concerned, I was sitting there on a ship, I was in Tahiti, and they would have let me sit there as long as possible to try, and because it was a problem they didn't need to fix. And so eventually I'd been there for about a month, just over a month, and I kind of said, no, time to go on. I'm sitting here, this isn't going anywhere, I need to move on. So I made the call and said I'd like to leave because I've got to get on with the rest of whatever happens next and get on and get cracking with it. And that was that decision just starting to formulate. Do I move on from that position of being a master? If I go to another company, you end up normally, as we'll all know, you drop down a rank mostly, unless you've been in rank for a very long time. Staff captain again, you work up, you're in a new organization, you then work up, and then after a trip, you'll likely get promoted back to master again, was what happened at the time. Or do you want to go down that route? And I thought, I've been master in 2 different companies. Now is the time to make a move ashore. I think I was mid-30s. I was fortunate enough to have command experience by then, and it is easier to have the decision made for you than having to make the decision by yourself. So the decision was half made, and I decided then I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to come ashore and see what happens next.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that the decision in some way was easier to be made because it was made for you. And I know we've talked about this, haven't we? A lot of our members describe how when they start that journey or considering that journey ashore, it's often because of personal reasons. They might want to start a family, or they may have started a young family, for example, or they just want to spend more time at home with loved ones. And it can be quite a very hard decision to come to, because it is such a wrench to leave the sea, to leave this career that you've spent, all of your life to date, or your career to date, kind of working towards. So do you have any kind of advice for anybody who may be kind of in that position at the moment, and how they might be able to find information or help to assist them at that time?
Well, I think it is hard, and I think with all the decisions, you're changing job, probably from the job that you want to do in the first place. You're taking your skills and expertise, but you're not quite sure perhaps where those skills and expertise are going to be most valuable to you. You're making a decision, a logistical change. You've been on leave. If you spend normally perhaps getting half the year or 4 months of the year off on leave, you're then going to go into a position where you might get 25 days leave per year. You've maybe been in a tax-free situation, and you're now facing a job where you may not get paid as much, and you might be having to pay tax on top of that. Just at the same time that you made the decision, because I've got a young family, just as your costs are rising, might be the time when you're faced with having to take a hit on salary, and that makes it very hard. So finding a mentor, finding a program like Sea to City, finding someone to talk it through, I think is very valuable. It's something that I didn't have at the time, and now there's many more. There's lots of mentor-mentee organizations now from cadets coming up, taking on through that way. But that transition from a sea to shore, I think this is possibly the only one.
Yeah, in terms of growing a personal relationship, I think our program is very unique, isn't there? There's, as you said, there's certainly other programs out there, but they kind of approach it in a very different way. So you said you didn't have the opportunity to have a mentor at that time. What do you think you could have got from it, if you, or would you have done anything differently, do you think, if you did have a mentor?
Yeah, I think it would have been, and I think it's not just for that first transition, making that first thinking, the leap is ashore when you get that first job, because the first job you get ashore may not be the right one. It's a big leap, and you've made a move. You may luckily end up in a really great position, and one that you've always wanted. Otherwise, you may have ended up somewhere thinking, actually, this might be good for a couple of years, and I might need to make another shift at some point, or you're in that career. And I think having someone to talk it through, make the decision where you'd like to go, making sure you end up in the right place. But it's that follow on after, actually, when you make that transition and you realize that what you thought the working ashore might be, actually the realities of working ashore. I mean, much as the realities of what you think working at sea is, and the realities of working at sea, what your perception is and what the reality is, I think really is worth having someone to talk to in the long term, almost throughout the first steps of your career ashore, rather than just that initial move. So I think my relationship with my mentee at the moment, which is very informal, when we meet up and we have a beer or we have a coffee or we go to an event together or we lift the phone, I see that ongoing. It takes a while for that to settle out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've certainly heard the same from some of our members who have gone through this program already, you know, that they kind of build everything up into that first shore-based role, which is absolutely important, but it's not the be all and end all, is it? Because there are so many opportunities that they may not, you know, realize exist out there, that, you know, you don't feel like you need to stay in that first job that you get. It can be a transition.
Yeah, I think you're just saying, if I had someone to talk to, I think I ended up in a job ashore, which was a great job, and it was good, and I enjoyed it, but I think I stayed too long. I didn't move on, you know, when perhaps I should have done, and I don't think I looked at all the other opportunities quickly enough. And I think having someone, knowing you're speaking to someone in 2 months' time or a month's time, it kind of keeps those questions fresh in your mind as to what I should be thinking about next.
Yeah.
And again, it also depends. Sometimes there are lots of opportunities out there. Sometimes the industry, as we know, is very cyclical. So sometimes there's fewer opportunities out there. Sometimes there's lots of opportunities, and sometimes there's just about right.
Yeah.
So it isn't always the fact that you can move on. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But I think in the first job ashore, I think I was probably there a couple of years too long, and I hadn't kind of grasped that you know. That's what a shore career is.
And funny you talk about opportunities, because we do have a question in the chat. It is from an existing member of ours, Stephen Gudgeon. So hello, Stephen. Thank you for joining us. Stephen says, moving to a job in London is financially beyond some seafarers thinking of coming ashore. You did mention, you know, some of those kind of pressures there. Are there opportunity available post-COVID?
I think there are opportunities in London. I think there has been for a while, and possibly there's been I think possibly more so than there was. I think it'll be interesting how the post-COVID thing settles down, as we're seeing travel settle down and everything else. But I do think it caused some confusion, and I do think there are always opportunities in London, and there are opportunities ashore wherever around the UK. I would say now at the moment there are opportunities, and seafarer skills for that coming ashore are needed, and hopefully the salaries are there to support that.
Yeah, I think that's often the case, isn't it? So we're hearing wider in the economy that there's very low unemployment at the moment, and that a lot of businesses are actually struggling to get the skills and the talent that they are looking for. So actually, flip that over to seafaring. This should be a really good opportunity for those people who have been to sea and got the experience to kind of bring those skills into a city environment.
Yeah, and I think London particularly, because I think, I mean, I randomly ended up living in London before I came ashore, which did make it easier. But I think it's a fair point that most seafarers would choose not to live in London, because why would you have the expense of living in London if you're going to sea 4 times a year and living away? So again, but you know, there's lots of opportunities all around the UK, but the London centric thing, and it is there are a number of jobs that are London centric. The cost of living in London is normally a reason why most seafarers don't live there, and then all of a sudden you realise that actually quite a lot of the opportunities are in London, and the expense differential is even greater, and makes that decision even harder.
Yeah. But of course, we all know that our ways of working has changed very much in the COVID pandemic, hasn't it? So perhaps that's going to bring some more flexibility for those London-based roles. I know I'm based in London. We've got some lovely offices here down in Elephant and Castle, but I'm here 3 days a week. You know, so I do get to work from home 2 days. So I imagine there's that same type of flexibility in maritime services as well.
Yep, I think there is that flexibility, and depending on the organisation, what that level of flexibility is very interesting. And that commute, and do you need to be there? Every organisation will work differently, but it's certainly a discussion to think there will be opportunities there, and flexible working and being in London fewer days a week is certainly something which is a reality now.
We've got another question asking to me, funnily enough, about our Nautilus members and how the the impact of the pandemic might be affecting some of their decisions around coming to shore. So I can say that we've had a lot of interest in this program at the moment. We've had a big uptick in the last couple of months of members seeking to join the mentoring program. But I could also refer you to some DFT numbers that were put out. I think it was at the start of this year. So that was for the years 2020 and 2021, which actually shows a big drop off on seafarers with current qualifications here in the UK. And the DFT's report states that that was very much an effect of the pandemic, with a lot of seafarers deciding that maybe they would retire a little bit earlier due to all the pressures that we know that they were under during those 2 years. So I think, Joss, to answer your question, there is quite a lot of flux in the seafaring community at the moment, and we'll just have to look to see how that plays out over the coming year. Yeah. So back to you, Richard. What are your kind of key tips for anybody who's considering that move now? Should they be not just looking into mentoring, but are there any other services or groups or anything else that they can explore to kind of help them in that journey?
Well, I would say at the start, when you're thinking about that, I would say there's certainly the organisations that exist in the UK for professional mariners, the Nautical Institute, Honourable Company Master Mariners, Nautilus, obviously. Get involved with those bodies if you're thinking of coming ashore. There's the schemes within them. There are people there who've already made that transition. So if you engage with those bodies, and whichever one is your preference, or all of them, they are an access into people, access into knowledge, and just going to their meetings, going to their events that they hold, you will bump into people who've made that transition. And I think the sooner you do that, the better. But also, if you are coming ashore and you're already part of those organisations, and myself, when I was at sea, I was part of Nautilus, and I was on their council, and that just gives you that insight into the other world of being ashore. And also, when you do go with your CV back to people ashore who can see that you've got other, even if you've never worked ashore, but you've engaged with other organisations and you've got an outward-looking view as to the world beyond ships and the sea, all that will pay dividends when you go into the organisations and say, I'm involved in these people and I'm on this committee, or I attend these. All of a sudden, that will go, this person is interested, this person already has a view to what the shore industry looks like, and no time will be lost in doing any of those things, that's for sure.
It's funny that you say no time will be lost there, and I can imagine our members who are currently at sea are thinking, well, I don't get much shore leave. Surely, I don't really have the ability to take part in these type of forums. It sounds like that's not actually the case. There is a way that you can take part even while you're still working at sea.
Well, I think, again, due to because we've got Zoom, because we've got everything's online, you don't have to physically go. And even if you don't live anywhere close to these things, the attendance at these events and attendance into webinars, and hopefully more people are getting access from sea. And I was at a meeting last week where there were people at sea joining in, where 2 or 3 years ago you'd never have seen people at sea joining in these events.
Absolutely.
And now access to becoming a central forum for everyone is becoming more and more normal and acceptable. And the idea that we're having a meeting, therefore there won't be anybody at sea, that's gone. Everyone can, and that, as long, I hope the access to the internet continues to grow for every seafarer. Some are more fortunate than others, and I get that. But even if you're on leave and you can't get to these things, there are opportunities. You just need to track them down and find them. But you can get involved in other ways other than attending branch meetings or London meetings to do that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So if anybody else would like to put some questions to Richard, we do have 3 more minutes.
Along the way of my, what somebody described as a nomadic journey that I've had both at sea and since coming ashore, and I'm not sure whether that was meant kindly or not, but it was my career was described as nomadic at one point, and in the middle of that, I did set myself up as my own consultancy for for a period when I knew there was some work coming in. I would suggest, yes, have a go. I know, and fortune favors the brave and all those things. But I think if you're coming ashore, and the other aspect, and I will say, the financial ability to come ashore and the change from earning a seafaring wage is probably a bit of the elephant in the room, and is something that you need to consider. So if you are coming ashore and you are going to set up your own business, that financial uncertainty is going to be greater, and therefore something that you need to manage into your plan as to how you're going to set your own business up. But I would say,
and you mean specifically because you're not guaranteed of having a salary coming into your account, so you might have cash flow initially unless you've already got a contract set up.
If you've been at sea for 20 years and you've saved up all your money in the bank, great, that, but not everybody has. So I would say you've got as much opportunity to work for yourself as you have for another company. The difference would purely be that financial backing that you have to make sure that you've got the support to do that, to make sure you give yourself enough time. If you come ashore and you get a shore job, within a month or 2 months, you might have money in the bank. If you come ashore and start up your own business, that time before getting some cash in the bank for you to call your own could take significantly longer. Hopefully not, but I think it would definitely take longer. It's just how much longer to do that.
And you will, of course, be spending money at the same time because you're setting up a business and you have outlet. But there must be other services, existing services, perhaps outside of the maritime sphere, that can give help and advice. I know there's some government services for setting up your own business, for example.
Yep. No, I think there is lots of support out there, and and as I say, it's something I've done, and also that sometimes it's out of necessity. You end up, one job finishes and you think, oh well, I'll also, I will say, I think another thing about setting up your own business or calling yourself an independent or whatever is it does fill your gap on your CV. So instead of coming ashore and taking it off as a gap year or a gap in your CV, by setting your own business up, it kind of it does help out and make it also shows that you've got the initiative to start your own business, that you're prepared to do it, you're prepared to take the risks in doing it. And it shows you to be adds to your skills and experience. So all those are positives to take that opportunity if that's the one you want to go for.
I think that's a really important little tip there, because for any recruiter, any company looking to recruit, gaps in CVs can be confusing. So it's not necessarily that they're not a bad thing, but you just need to be able to explain coherently if you do have gaps in your CV. And ideally, as you described their career, over 35, and you're looking to move ashore, how can you do so without it costing an arm and a leg?
I think the sooner, if you are going to make the move ashore, you've got to think, not just I've decided to do it, I'm going to do it in 3 months' time or after my next trip. I would say you've got to be planning this if you can. I know it's hard, but the sooner you start planning for it, the more you'll have the finances in place to do it, because you'll have thought about it. It's an unfortunate thing that most people, by the time you've got your senior ticket and you've been given a position of responsibility on board your ship, you've probably got to the age, which is also that same age where coming ashore is, you may have family, you may have other commitments, and you may have, so it does, by any stretch of the imagination, it'll take you 10 years to have got your tickets and a job of some seniority, if that's when you choose to go. And unfortunately, that's usually in that same time of busy life when other things are happening. So probably no help if you just decided I want to come ashore in 3 months' time. But even if I think if you are at sea, it may be that you end up coming ashore anyway, because things change, the ships change, your company changes, or whatever. So it's a plan. The sooner you have that plan and thinking, I need to work out the logistics. Where am I going to live? Am I living in the right place? Am I doing the right things? Am I getting the right qualifications? Am I making the right links with industry? And am I starting to build perhaps a financial safety net to give me that time to transition across?
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you. I will put one final question to you, and it is kind of linked. So how important do you think is extensive experience at sea, or can you successfully come ashore, at the 3rd or 2nd officer level?
No right answer to this one.
Okay.
Always the question is, can I come ashore without a master or chief's ticket? Can I come ashore without master's experience or chief engineer's experience? When is the right time to come ashore? And that question has been asked forever. And what I would say, if you're very close to getting a senior ticket, or you're very close to getting a senior position on board, it may be worth delaying your decision until you can get it. But if you see that being a long way off until you're going to get your next ticket or your next promotion, then there's probably no time like the present.
So you don't think, Richard, that there is any kind of perception by shore-based employers that they're looking for a particular level, or is that just hearsay?
It depends which industry you go into.
Okay.
If you go into, there are industries we're coming ashore with any shore experience, a second officer, third officer, into other marine-based jobs, VTS, etc., and other port authorities and organizations where you can slot in at any level. Those opportunities are there, and that sea experience you've got will assist. But the less experience and less qualifications you have, the more limited those opportunities are going to be. And
yes,
and then that it's as simple as that. And once you get into other organizations, and many of the ones in clubs and law firms in London, then there'll be the expectation of certification and experience in senior rank. All adds into the benefits that you'll bring to them as you come ashore.
Yeah.
But it's very hard. What I wouldn't ever say is there's a hard and fast rule. I would also say that the thresholds that used to exist are perhaps lowering, and with the demand that is out there for people, those demands of a command experience or senior tickets, those bars are reducing or lowering for the time being, and not to say they might harden up again as the industry ebbs and flows.
Yes,
but I would say there are some indications that those hard lines that used to exist are no longer there. But as with anything, you come ashore, it'll be you against the other person. Really important that your seafaring knowledge and your skills, whatever your certificate level, whatever your experience level, there is the lack of understanding ashore, and the number of people who don't have the knowledge of what seafaring is, it is significant. We are still a very, very small minority, and we have a lot of knowledge that many other organizations really don't have, and employ lots of people in marine-based industries where actually people with marine experience are very, very few. So your knowledge and experience is valuable. As you say, don't under-egg it.
Absolutely.
You have experience that is quite difficult to get hold of, and will reap benefits later. Definitely. Don't be shy of saying what you've done and where you've been and how you've used it, because it is really valuable, and it is in demand.
Yeah, you are your greatest advocate, aren't you? So yeah, that's a wonderful place to end it. Thank you very much, Richard. That's been invaluable. We're getting a few thanks for you on the chat, and I know that people are saying they found it very useful, which is fantastic. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for the first in this series of webinars. We will be looking to have more in future, so please do join us. But I want to give a huge thank you to Richard for sharing your journey with us. It's all really useful advice. It's very invaluable, and I know that our members will find it very useful. As I said at the start of the webinar, I've put a link in the chat to the Sea to City mentoring scheme. Please do check that out if you're interested. Also look into membership of Nautilus International if you're not currently a member. Thank you for attending, and I hope to see you next time in the next webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye now.